Chapter 24. 2 hours later, he knocked at Bazarov's door. "I must apologize for hindering you in your scientific pursuits," he began, seating himself on a chair in the window and leaning with both hands on a handsome walking stick with an ivory knob. He usually walked without a stick. "But I am constrained to beg you to spare me 5 minutes of your time. No more." "All my time is at your disposal," answered Bazarov, over whose face there passed a quick change of expression as soon as Pavel Petrovich crossed the threshold. 5 minutes will be enough for me. I have come to put a single question to you." "The question? What is it about?" "I will tell you if you will kindly hear me out. At the commencement of your stay in my brother's house, before I had renounced the pleasure of conversing with you, it was my fortune to hear your opinions on many subjects. But so far as my memory serves, neither between us nor in my presence was the subject of single combats and dueling in general broached. Allow me to hear what are your views on that subject." Bazarov, who had risen to meet Pavel Petrovich, sat down on the edge of the table and folded his arms. "My view is," he said, "that from the theoretical standpoint, dueling is absurd. From the practical standpoint, now it's quite a different matter." "That is, you mean to say, if I understand you right, that whatever your theoretical views on dueling, you would not in practice allow yourself to be insulted without demanding satisfaction." "You have guessed my meaning absolutely." "Very good. I am very glad to hear you say so. Your words relieve me from a state of incertitude." "Of uncertainty, you mean to say?" "That is all the same. I express myself so as to be understood. I am not a seminary rat. Your words save me from a rather deplorable necessity. I have made up my mind to fight you." Bazarov opened his eyes wide. "Me? Undoubtedly. But what for, pray?" "I could explain the reason to you," began Pavel Petrovich, "but I prefer to be silent about it. To my idea, your presence here is superfluous. I cannot endure you. I despise you. And if that is not enough for you..." Pavel Petrovich's eyes glittered. Bazarov's too were flashing. "Very good," he assented. "No need of further explanations. You've a whim to try your chivalrous spirit upon me. I might refuse you this pleasure, but so be it." "I am sensible of my obligation to you," replied Pavel Petrovich, "and may reckon then on your accepting my challenge without compelling me to resort to violent measures." "That means, speaking without metaphor, to that stick?" Bazarov remarked coolly. "That is precisely correct. It's quite unnecessary for you to insult me. Indeed, it would not be a perfectly safe proceeding. You can remain a gentleman. I accept your challenge, too, like a gentleman." "That is excellent," observed Pavel Petrovich, putting his stick in the corner. "We will say a few words directly about the conditions of our duel, but I should like first to know whether you think it necessary to resort to the formality of a trifling dispute which might serve as a pretext for my challenge." "No, it's better without formalities." "I think so myself. I presume it is also out of place to go into the real grounds of our difference. We cannot endure one another. What more is necessary?" "What more, indeed?" repeated Bazarov ironically. "As regards the conditions of the meeting itself, seeing that we shall have no seconds, for where could we get them?" "Exactly so, where could we get them?" "Then I have the honor to lay the following proposition before you. The combat to take place early tomorrow at 6, let us say, behind the copse, with pistols at a distance of 10 paces. "At 10 paces? That will do. We hate one another at that distance." "We might have it 8, remarked Pavel Petrovich. "We might?" "To fire twice, and to be ready for any result, let each put a letter in his pocket in which he accuses himself of his end. Now, that I don't approve of at all, observed Bazarov. There's a slight flavor of the French novel about it, something not very plausible. Perhaps. You will agree, however, that it would be unpleasant to encourage suspicion of murder. I agree as to that. But there is a means of avoiding that painful reproach. We shall have no seconds, but we can have a witness. And whom, allow me to inquire? Why, Pyotr. What Pyotr? Your brother's valet. He's a man who has attained to the acme of contemporary culture, and he will perform his part with all the comme il faut necessary in such cases. I think you are joking, sir. Not at all. If you think over my suggestion, you will be convinced that it's full of common sense and simplicity. You can't hide a candle under a bushel, but I'll undertake to prepare Pyotr in a fitting manner and bring him onto the field of battle. You persist in jesting still, Pavel Petrovich declared, getting up from his chair. But after the courteous readiness you have shown me, I have no right to pretend to lay down, and so everything is arranged. By the way, perhaps you have no pistols? How should I have pistols, Pavel Petrovich? I'm not in the army. In that case, I offer you mine. You may rest assured that it's 5 years now since I shot with them. That's a very consoling piece of news. Pavel Petrovich took up his stick. And now, my dear sir, it only remains for me to thank you and to leave you to your studies. I have the honor to take leave of you. Till we have the pleasure of meeting again, my dear sir, said Bazarov, conducting his visitor to the door. Pavel Petrovich went out, while Bazarov remained standing a minute before the door, and suddenly exclaimed, "Pish, well, I'm dashed. How fine and how foolish. A pretty farce we've been through, like trained dogs dancing on their hind paws." But to decline was out of the question. Why, I do believe he'd have struck me, and then... Bazarov turned white at the very thought. All his pride was up in arms at once. Then it might have come to my strangling him like a cat. He went back to his microscope, but his heart was beating, and the composure necessary for taking observations had disappeared. He caught sight of us today, he thought. But would he really act like this on his brother's account? And what a mighty matter is it, a kiss? There must be something else in it. Bah, isn't he perhaps in love with her himself? To be sure, he's in love, it's as clear as day. What a complication. It's a nuisance, he decided at last. It's a bad job, look at it which way you will. In the first place, to risk a bullet through one's brains, and in any case to go away, and then Arkady and that dear innocent pussy Nikolai Petrovich, it's a bad job. An awfully bad job. The day passed in a kind of peculiar stillness and languor. Fenichka gave no sign of her existence. She sat in her little room like a mouse in its hole. Nikolai Petrovich had a careworn air. He had just heard that blight had begun to appear in his wheat, upon which he had in particular rested his hopes. Pavel Petrovich overwhelmed everyone, even Prokofitch, with his icy courtesy. Bazarov began a letter to his father, but tore it up and threw it under the table. If I die, he thought, they will find it out. But I'm not going to die, no. I shall struggle along in this world a good while yet. He gave Pyotr orders to come to him on important business the next morning as soon as it was light. Pyotr imagined that he wanted to take him to Petersburg with him. Bazarov went late to bed, and all night long he was harassed by disordered dreams. Madame Odintsov kept appearing in them. Now she was his mother, and she was followed by a kitten with black whiskers, and this kitten seemed to be Fenichka. Then Pavel Petrovich took the shape of a great wood with which he had yet to fight. Pyotr waked him up at 4 o'clock. He dressed at once and went out with him. It was a lovely fresh morning. Tiny flecked clouds hovered overhead in little curls of foam on the pale clear blue. A fine dew lay in drops on the leaves and grass and sparkled like silver on the spider's webs. The damp, dark earth seemed still to keep traces of the rosy dawn. From the whole sky, the songs of larks came pouring in showers. Bazarov walked as far as the copse, sat down in the shade at its edge, and only then disclosed to Pyotr the nature of the service he expected of him. The refined valet was mortally alarmed, but Bazarov soothed him by the assurance that he would have nothing to do but stand at a distance and look on, and that he would not incur any sort of responsibility. And meantime, he added, only think what an important part you have to play. Pyotr threw up his hands, looked down and leaned against the birch tree, looking green with terror. The road from Marino skirted the copse. A light dust lay on it, untouched by wheel or foot since the previous day. Bazarov unconsciously stared along this road, picked and gnawed a blade of grass while he kept repeating to himself, what a piece of foolery. The chill of the early morning made him shiver twice. Pyotr looked at him dejectedly, but Bazarov only smiled. He was not afraid. The tramp of horses' hooves was heard along the road. A peasant came into sight from behind the trees. He was driving before him two horses hobbled together, and as he passed Bazarov, he looked at him rather strangely, without touching his cap, which it was easy to see disturbed Pyotr as an unlucky omen. There's someone else up early too, thought Bazarov. But he at least has got up for work while we... Fancy, the gentleman's coming, Pyotr faltered suddenly. Bazarov raised his head and saw Pavel Petrovich. Dressed in a light check jacket and snow-white trousers, he was walking rapidly along the road. Under his arm, he carried a box wrapped up in green cloth. I beg your pardon. I believe I have kept you waiting, he observed, bowing first to Bazarov, then to Pyotr, whom he treated respectfully at that instant, as representing something in the nature of a second. I was unwilling to wake my man. It doesn't matter, answered Bazarov. We've only just arrived ourselves. Ah, so much the better. Pavel Petrovich took a look round. There's no one in sight, no one hinders us, we can proceed. Let us proceed. You do not, I presume, desire any fresh explanations? No, I don't. Would you like to load? Inquired Pavel Petrovich, taking the pistols out of the box. No, you load, and I will measure out the paces. My legs are longer, added Bazarov with a smile. 1, 2, 3. Evgeny Vasilievich, Pyotr faltered with an effort. He was shaking as though he were in a fever. Say what you like, I am going farther off. 4, 5. Good. Move away, my good fellow, move away. You may get behind a tree even, and stop up your ears. Only don't shut your eyes. And if anyone falls, run and pick him up. 6, 7, 8. Bazarov stopped. Is that enough? He said, turning to Pavel Petrovich. Or shall I add 2 paces more? As you like, replied the latter, pressing down the second bullet. Well, we'll make it 2 paces more. Bazarov drew a line on the ground with the toe of his boot. There's the barrier, then. By the way, how many paces may each of us go back from the barrier? That's an important question, too. That point was not discussed yesterday. I imagine 10, replied Pavel Petrovich, handing Bazarov both pistols. Will you be so good as to choose? I will be so good. But, Pavel Petrovich, you must admit our combat is singular to the point of absurdity. Only look at the countenance of our second. You are disposed to laugh at everything, answered Pavel Petrovich. I acknowledge the strangeness of our duel, but I think it my duty to warn you that I intend to fight seriously. A bon entendeur. Salut. Oh, I don't doubt that we've made up our minds to make away with each other, but why not laugh too, and unite utile dulce? You talk to me in French while I talk to you in Latin. I am going to fight in earnest, repeated Pavel Petrovich, and he walked off to his place. Bazarov, on his side, counted off 10 paces from the barrier and stood still. Are you ready? Asked Pavel Petrovich. Perfectly. We can approach one another. Bazarov moved slowly forward, and Pavel Petrovich, his left hand thrust in his pocket, walked towards him, gradually raising the muzzle of his pistol. He's aiming straight at my nose, thought Bazarov. And doesn't he blink down it carefully, the ruffian? Not an agreeable sensation, though. I'm going to look at his watch chain. Something whizzed sharply by his very ear, and at the same instant there was the sound of a shot. I heard it, so it must be all right. Had time to flash through Bazarov's brain. He took one more step and without taking aim pressed the spring. Pavel Petrovich gave a slight start and clutched at his thigh. A stream of blood began to trickle down his white trousers. Bazarov flung aside the pistol and went up to his antagonist. "Are you wounded?" he said. "You had the right to call me up to the barrier," said Pavel Petrovich, "but that's of no consequence. According to our agreement, each of us has the right to one more shot." "All right, but excuse me, that'll do another time," answered Bazarov, catching hold of Pavel Petrovich, who was beginning to turn pale. "Now, I'm not a duelist, but a doctor, and I must have a look at your wound before anything else. Pyotr, come here. Pyotr, where have you gone to?" "That's all nonsense. I need no one's aid," Pavel Petrovich declared jerkily. "And we must... again..." He tried to pull at his mustaches, but his hand failed him. His eyes grew dim, and he lost consciousness. "Here's a pretty pass. A fainting fit. What next?" Bazarov cried unconsciously as he laid Pavel Petrovich on the grass. "Let's have a look what's wrong." He pulled out a handkerchief, wiped away the blood, and began feeling round the wound. "The bone's not touched," he muttered through his teeth. "The ball didn't go deep. One muscle, vastus externus, grazed. He'll be dancing about in 3 weeks. And to faint, oh, these nervous people, how I hate them. My word, what a delicate skin." "Is he killed?" The quaking voice of Pyotr came rustling behind his back. Bazarov looked round. "Go for some water as quick as you can, my good fellow, and he'll outlive us yet." But the modern servant seemed not to understand his words, and he did not stir. Pavel Petrovich slowly opened his eyes. "He will die," whispered Pyotr, and he began crossing himself. "You are right. What an imbecile countenance," remarked the wounded gentleman with a forced smile. "Well, go for the water, damn you!" shouted Bazarov. "No need. It was a momentary vertigo. Help me to sit up. There, that's right. I only need something to bind up this scratch, and I can reach home on foot, or else you can send a droshky for me. The duel, if you are willing, shall not be renewed. You have behaved honorably today. Today, observe." "There's no need to recall the past," rejoined Bazarov. "And as regards the future, it's not worthwhile for you to trouble your head about that either, for I intend being off without delay. Let me bind up your leg now. Your wound's not serious, but it's always best to stop bleeding. But first I must bring this corpse to his senses." Bazarov shook Pyotr by the collar and sent him for a droshky. "Mind you don't frighten my brother," Pavel Petrovich said to him. "Don't dream of informing him." Pyotr flew off. And while he was running for a droshky, the two antagonists sat on the ground and said nothing. Pavel Petrovich tried not to look at Bazarov. He did not want to be reconciled to him in any case. He was ashamed of his own haughtiness, of his failure. He was ashamed of the whole position he had brought about, even while he felt it could not have ended in a more favorable manner. At any rate, there will be no scandal, he consoled himself by reflecting, and for that I am thankful. The silence was prolonged, a silence distressing and awkward. Both of them were ill at ease. Each was conscious that the other understood him. That is pleasant to friends, and always very unpleasant to those who are not friends, especially when it is impossible either to have things out or to separate. "Haven't I bound up your leg too tight?" inquired Bazarov at last. "No, not at all. It's excellent," answered Pavel Petrovich, and after a brief pause he added, There's no deceiving my brother. We shall have to tell him we quarreled over politics. Very good, assented Bazarov. You can say I insulted all Anglo-maniacs. That will do excellently. What do you imagine that man thinks of us now? Continued Pavel Petrovich, pointing to the same peasant who had driven the hobbled horses past Bazarov a few minutes before the duel, and going back again along the road, took off his cap at the sight of the gentlefolk. Who can tell? Answered Bazarov. It is quite likely he thinks nothing. The Russian peasant is that mysterious unknown about whom Mrs. Radcliffe used to talk so much. Who is to understand him? He doesn't understand himself. Ah, so that's your idea, Pavel Petrovich began, and suddenly he cried, Look what your fool of a Pyotr has done. Here's my brother galloping up to us. Bazarov turned around and saw the pale face of Nikolai Petrovich, who was sitting in the droshky. He jumped out of it before it had stopped and rushed up to his brother. What does this mean? He said in an agitated voice. Yevgeny Vasilievich, pray, what is this? Nothing, answered Pavel Petrovich. They have alarmed you for nothing. I had a little dispute with Mr. Bazarov, and I have had to pay for it a little. But what was it all about? Mercy on us. How can I tell you? Mr. Bazarov alluded disrespectfully to Sir Robert Peel. I must hasten to add that I am the only person to blame in all this, while Mr. Bazarov has behaved most honorably. I called him out. But you're covered with blood, good heavens! Well, did you suppose I had water in my veins? But this bloodletting is positively beneficial to me. Isn't that so, Doctor? Help me to get into the droshky, and don't give way to melancholy. I shall be quite well tomorrow. That's it. Excellent. Drive on, coachman. Nikolai Petrovich walked after the droshky. Bazarov was remaining where he was. I must ask you to look after my brother, Nikolai Petrovich said to him, till we get another doctor from the town. Bazarov nodded his head without speaking. In an hour's time, Pavel Petrovich was already lying in bed with a skillfully bandaged leg. The whole house was alarmed. Fenichka fainted. Nikolai Petrovich kept stealthily wringing his hands, while Pavel Petrovich laughed and joked, especially with Bazarov. He had put on a fine cambric nightshirt, an elegant morning wrapper, and a fez, did not allow the blinds to be drawn down, and humorously complained of the necessity of being kept from food. Towards night, however, he began to be feverish. His head ached. The doctor arrived from the town. Nikolai Petrovich would not listen to his brother, and indeed Bazarov himself didn't wish him to. He sat the whole day in his room, looking yellow and vindictive, and only went in to the invalid for as brief a time as possible. Twice he happened to meet Fenichka, but she shrank away from him with horror. The new doctor advised a cooling diet. He confirmed, however, Bazarov's assertion that there was no danger. Nikolai Petrovich told him his brother had wounded himself by accident, to which the doctor responded, But having 25 silver rubles slipped into his hand on the spot, he observed, You don't say so. Well, it's a thing that often happens, to be sure. No one in the house went to bed or undressed. Nikolai Petrovich kept going into his brother on tiptoe, retreating on tiptoe again. The latter dozed, moaned a little, told him in French, Couchez-vous, and asked for a drink. Nikolai Petrovich sent Fenichka twice to take him a glass of lemonade. Pavel Petrovich gazed at her intently and drank off the glass to the last drop. Towards morning, the fever had increased a little. There was slight delirium. At first, Pavel Petrovich uttered incoherent words. Then, suddenly, he opened his eyes, and seeing his brother near his bed, bending anxiously over him, he said, Don't you think, Nikolai, Fenichka has something in common with Nellie? What Nellie, Pavel, dear? How can you ask? Princess R, especially in the upper part of the face. C'est de la même famille. Nikolai Petrovich made no answer, while inwardly he marveled at the persistence of old passions in man. It's like this when it comes to the surface, he thought. I love that light-headed creature," moaned Pavel Petrovich, clasping his hands mournfully behind his head. "I can't bear any insolent upstart to dare to touch," he whispered a few minutes later. Nikolai Petrovich only sighed. He did not even suspect to whom these words referred. Bazarov presented himself before him at 8 o'clock the next day. He had already had time to pack and to set free all his frogs, insects, and birds. "You have come to say goodbye to me?" said Nikolai Petrovich, getting up to meet him. "Yes. I understand you and approve of you fully. My poor brother, of course, is to blame, and he is punished for it. He told me himself that he made it impossible for you to act otherwise. I believe that you could not avoid this duel, which to some extent is explained by the almost constant antagonism of your respective views." Nikolai Petrovich began to get a little mixed up in his words. "My brother is a man of the old school, hot-tempered and obstinate. Thank God that it has ended as it has. I have taken every precaution to avoid publicity. I am leaving you my address in case there's any fuss," Bazarov remarked casually. "I hope there will be no fuss, Yevgeny Vasilyevich. I am very sorry your stay in my house should have such an end. It is the more distressing to me through Arkady's. I shall be seeing him, I expect," replied Bazarov, in whom explanations and protestations of every sort always aroused a feeling of impatience. "In case I don't, I beg you to say goodbye to him for me and accept the expression of my regret." "And I beg," answered Nikolai Petrovich. But Bazarov went off without waiting for the end of his sentence. When he heard of Bazarov's going, Pavel Petrovich expressed a desire to see him and shook his hand. But even then he remained as cold as ice. He realized that Pavel Petrovich wanted to play the magnanimous. He did not succeed in saying goodbye to Fenichka. He only exchanged glances with her at the window. Her face struck him as looking dejected. "She'll come to grief, perhaps," he said to himself. "But who knows, she'll pull through somehow, I dare say." Pyotr, however, was so overcome that he wept on his shoulder, till Bazarov calmed him by asking if he'd a constant supply laid on in his eyes, while Dunyasha was obliged to run away into the wood to hide her emotion. The originator of all this woe got into a light cart, smoked a cigar, and when at the 3rd mile at the bend in the road, the Kirsanov's farm with its new house could be seen in a long line, he merely spat, and muttering, "Cursed aristocrats," wrapped himself closer in his cloak. Pavel Petrovich was soon better, but he had to keep to his bed about a week. He bore his captivity, as he called it, pretty patiently, though he took great pains over his toilette, and had everything scented with eau de cologne. Nikolai Petrovich used to read him the journals. Fenichka waited on him as before, brought him lemonade, soup, boiled eggs, and tea. But she was overcome with secret dread whenever she went into his room. Pavel Petrovich's unexpected action had alarmed everyone in the house, and her more than anyone. Prokofych was the only person not agitated by it. He discoursed upon how gentlemen in his day used to fight, but only with real gentlemen. Low curs like that, they used to order a horsewhipping in the stable for their insolence. Fenichka's conscience scarcely reproached her, but she was tormented at times by the thought of the real cause of the quarrel. And Pavel Petrovich, too, looked at her so strangely that even when her back was turned, she felt his eyes upon her. She grew thinner from constant inward agitation, and, as is always the way, became still more charming. One day, the incident took place in the morning. Pavel Petrovich felt better and moved from his bed to the sofa, while Nikolai Petrovich, having satisfied himself he was better, went off to the threshing floor. Fenichka brought him a cup of tea, and setting it down on a little table, was about to withdraw. Pavel Petrovich detained her. "Where are you going in such a hurry, Fedosya Nikolaevna?" he began. "Are you busy?" No, I have to pour out tea. Dunyasha will do that without you. Sit a little while with a poor invalid. By the way, I must have a little talk with you. Fenichka sat down on the edge of an easy chair without speaking. Listen, said Pavel Petrovich, tugging at his mustaches. I have long wanted to ask you something. You seem somehow afraid of me. I? Yes, you. You never look at me as though your conscience were not at rest. Fenichka crimsoned, but looked at Pavel Petrovich. He impressed her as looking strange, and her heart began throbbing slowly. Is your conscience at rest? He questioned her. Why should it not be at rest? She faltered. Goodness knows why. Besides, whom can you have wronged? Me? That is not likely. Any other people in the house here? That too is something incredible. Can it be my brother? But you love him, don't you? I love him. With your whole soul? With your whole heart? I love Nikolai Petrovich with my whole heart. Truly? Look at me, Fenichka. It was the first time he had called her that name. You know, it's a great sin telling lies. I am not telling lies, Pavel Petrovich. Not love Nikolai Petrovich. I shouldn't care to live after that. And will you never give him up for anyone? For whom could I give him up? For whom, indeed? Well, how about that gentleman who has just gone away from here? Fenichka got up. My God, Pavel Petrovich, what are you torturing me for? What have I done to you? How can such things be said? Fenichka, said Pavel Petrovich in a sorrowful voice. You know, I saw. What did you see? Well, there. In the arbor. Fenichka crimsoned to her hair and to her ears. How was I to blame for that? She articulated with an effort. Pavel Petrovich raised himself up. You were not to blame? No? Not at all? I love Nikolai Petrovich and no one else in the world, and I shall always love him, cried Fenichka with sudden force, while her throat seemed fairly breaking with sobs. As for what you saw at the dreadful day of judgment, I will say I'm not to blame and wasn't to blame for it, and I would rather die at once if people can suspect me of such a thing against my benefactor, Nikolai Petrovich. But here her voice broke, and at the same time she felt that Pavel Petrovich was snatching and pressing her hand. She looked at him and was fairly petrified. He had turned even paler than before. His eyes were shining, and what was most marvelous of all, one large, solitary tear was rolling down his cheek. Fenichka, he was saying in a strange whisper, love him. Love my brother. Don't give him up for anyone in the world. Don't listen to anyone else. Think what can be more terrible than to love and not be loved. Never leave my poor Nikolai. Fenichka's eyes were dry, and her terror had passed away. So great was her amazement. But what were her feelings when Pavel Petrovich himself put her hand to his lips and seemed to pierce into it without kissing it, and only heaving convulsive sighs from time to time. Goodness, she thought, isn't it some attack coming on him? At that instant, his whole ruined life was stirred up within him. The staircase creaked under rapidly approaching footsteps. He pushed her away from him and let his head drop back on the pillow. The door opened, and Nikolai Petrovich entered, cheerful, fresh, and ruddy. Mitya, as fresh and ruddy as his father, in nothing but his little shirt, was frisking on his shoulder, catching the big buttons of his rough country coat with his little bare toes. Fenichka simply flung herself upon him and, clasping him and her son together in her arms, dropped her head on his shoulder. Nikolai Petrovich was surprised. Fenichka, the reserved and staid Fenichka, had never given him a caress in the presence of a third person. "What's the matter?" he said, and glancing at his brother, he gave her Mitya. "You don't feel worse?" he inquired, going up to Pavel Petrovich. He buried his face in a cambric handkerchief. "No, not at all. On the contrary, I am much better." "You were in too great a hurry to move onto the sofa. Where are you going?" added Nikolai Petrovich, turning round to Fenichka, but she had already closed the door behind her. "I was bringing in my young hero to show you. He's been crying for his uncle." "Why has she carried him off? What's wrong with you, though? Has anything passed between you, eh?" "Brother," said Pavel Petrovich solemnly. Nikolai Petrovich started. He felt dismayed. He could not have said why himself. "Brother," repeated Pavel Petrovich, "give me your word that you will carry out my one request." "What request? Tell me." "It is very important. The whole happiness of your life, to my idea, depends on it. I have been thinking a great deal all this time over what I want to say to you now. Brother, do your duty. The duty of an honest and generous man. Put an end to the scandal and bad example you are setting. You, the best of men." "What do you mean, Pavel?" "Marry Fenichka. She loves you. She is the mother of your son." Nikolai Petrovich stepped back a pace and flung up his hands. "Do you say that, Pavel? You, whom I have always regarded as the most determined opponent of such marriages. You say that? Don't you know that it has simply been out of respect for you that I have not done what you so rightly call my duty?" "You were wrong to respect me in that case," Pavel Petrovich responded with a weary smile. "I begin to think Bazarov was right in accusing me of snobbishness. No, dear brother, don't let us worry ourselves about appearances and the world's opinion anymore. We are old folks and humble now. It's time we laid aside vanity of all kinds. Let us, just as you say, do our duty, and mind, we shall get happiness that way into the bargain." Nikolai Petrovich rushed to embrace his brother. "You have opened my eyes completely," he cried. "I was right in always declaring you the wisest and kindest-hearted fellow in the world, and now I see you are just as reasonable as you are noble-hearted." "Quietly, quietly," Pavel Petrovich interrupted him. "Don't hurt the leg of your reasonable brother, who at close upon 50 has been fighting a duel like an ensign. So then, it's a settled matter. Fenichka is to be my belle-sœur, my dearest Pavel. But what will Arkady say?" "Arkady? He'll be in ecstasies, you may depend upon it. Marriage is against his principles, but then the sentiment of equality in him will be gratified. And after all, what sense have class distinctions au 19e siècle? Pavel, let me kiss you once more. Don't be afraid. I'll be careful." The brothers embraced each other. "What do you think? Should you not inform her of your intention now?" queried Pavel Petrovich. "Why be in a hurry?" responded Nikolai Petrovich. "Has there been any conversation between you?" "Conversation between us? Quelle idée!" "Well, that is all right then. First of all, you must get well. And meanwhile, there's plenty of time. We must think it over well and consider... But your mind is made up, I suppose?" "Of course my mind is made up, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart. I will leave you now. You must rest, and the excitement is bad for you. But we will talk it over again. Sleep well, dear heart, and God bless you." "What is he thanking me like that for?" thought Pavel Petrovich when he was left alone. As though it did not depend on him. "I will go away as soon as he is married, somewhere a long way off to Dresden or Florence, and will live there till..." Pavel Petrovich moistened his forehead with eau de cologne and closed his eyes. His beautiful, emaciated head the glaring daylight shining full upon it, lay on the white pillow like the head of a dead man. And indeed, he was a dead man. Chapter 25. At Nikolskoye, Katya and Arkady were sitting in the garden on a turf seat in the shade of a tall ash tree. Fifi had placed himself on the ground near them, giving his slender body that graceful curve which is known among dog fanciers as the hair bend. Both Arkady and Katya were silent. He was holding a half-open book in his hands, while she was picking out of a basket the few crumbs of bread left in it, and throwing them to a small family of sparrows who, with the frightened impudence peculiar to them, were hopping and chirping at her very feet. A faint breeze, stirring in the ash leaves, kept slowly moving pale gold flecks of sunlight up and down over the path of Fifi's tawny back. A patch of unbroken shade fell upon Arkady and Katya. Only from time to time a bright streak gleamed on her hair. Both were silent. But the very way in which they were silent, in which they were sitting together, was expressive of confidential intimacy. Each of them seemed not even to be thinking of his companion, while secretly rejoicing in his presence. Their faces, too, had changed since we saw them last. Arkady looked more tranquil, Katya brighter and more daring. "Don't you think," began Arkady, "that the ash has been very well named in Russian Yasen? No other tree is so slightly and brightly transparent, Yasno, against the air as it is." Katya raised her eyes to look upward and assented, "Yes." While Arkady thought, "Well, she does not reproach me for talking finely." "I don't like Heine," said Katya, glancing towards the book which Arkady was holding in his hands, "either when he laughs or when he weeps. I like him when he's thoughtful and melancholy." "And I like him when he laughs," remarked Arkady. "That's the relics left in you of your old satirical tendencies." Relics, thought Arkady. If Bazarov had heard that. "Wait a little, we shall transform you." "Who will transform me? You?" "Who? My sister? Porfiry Platonich, whom you've given up quarreling with? Auntie, whom you escorted to church the day before yesterday?" "Well, I couldn't refuse. And as for Anna Sergeyevna, she agreed with Yevgeny in a great many things, you remember? My sister was under his influence then, just as you were. As I was. Do you discover, may I ask, that I've shaken off his influence now?" Katya did not speak. "I know," pursued Arkady, "you never liked him. I can have no opinion about him. Do you know, Katerina Sergeyevna, every time I hear that answer, I disbelieve it. There is no man that every one of us could not have an opinion about. That's simply a way of getting out of it." "Well, I'll say then, it's not exactly that I don't like him, but I feel that he's of a different order from me, and I am different from him, and you too are different from him." "How's that?" "How can I tell you? He's a wild animal, and you and I are tame." "Am I tame too?" Katya nodded. Arkady scratched his ear. "Let me tell you, Katerina Sergeyevna, you know, that's really an insult. Why, would you like to be a wild, not wild, but strong, full of force? It's no good wishing for that. Your friend, you see, doesn't wish for it, but he has it." "So you imagine he had a great influence on Anna Sergeyevna?" "Yes, but no one can keep the upper hand of her for long," added Katya in a low voice. "Why do you think that?" "She's very proud." "I didn't mean that. She values her independence a great deal." "Who doesn't value it?" asked Arkady, and a thought flashed through his mind. What good is it? What good is it, it occurred to Katya to wonder too. When young people are often together on friendly terms, they are constantly stumbling on the same ideas. Arkady smiled, and coming slightly closer to Katya, he said in a whisper, "Confess that you are a little afraid of her." "Of whom?" "Her," repeated Arkady significantly. "And how about you?" Katya asked in her turn. "I am too. Observe, I said I am too." Katya threatened him with her finger. "I wonder at that," she began. "My sister has never felt so friendly to you as just now. Much more so than when you first came." "Really? Why, haven't you noticed it? Aren't you glad of it?" Arkady grew thoughtful. "How have I succeeded in gaining Anna Sergeyevna's good opinion? Wasn't it because I brought her your mother's letters?" "Both that and other causes which I shan't tell you." "Why?" "I shan't say." "Oh, I know you're very obstinate." "Yes, I am. And observant." Katya gave Arkady a sidelong look. "Perhaps so. Does that irritate you?" "What are you thinking of?" "I am wondering how you have come to be as observant as in fact you are. You are so shy, so reserved. You keep everyone at a distance." "I have lived a great deal alone." "That drives one to reflection. But do I really keep everyone at a distance?" Arkady flung a grateful glance at Katya. "That's all very well," he pursued, "but people in your position, I mean in your circumstances, don't often have that faculty. It's hard for them, as it is for sovereigns, to get at the truth." "But you see, I am not rich." Arkady was taken aback and did not at once understand Katya. "Why, of course. The property's all her sister's," struck him suddenly. The thought was not unpleasing to him. "How nicely you said that," he commented. "What?" "You said it nicely, simply, without being ashamed or making a boast of it. By the way, I imagine there must always be something special, a kind of pride of a sort in the feeling of any man who knows and says he is poor." "I have never experienced anything of that sort, thanks to my sister. I only referred to my position just now because it happened to come up." "Well, but you must own you have a share of that pride I spoke of just now." "For instance?" "For instance, you, forgive the question, you wouldn't marry a rich man, I fancy, would you?" "If I loved him very much. No, I think even then I wouldn't marry him." "There, you see," cried Arkady, and after a short pause he added, "And why wouldn't you marry him?" "Because even in the ballads, unequal matches are always unlucky." "You want to rule, perhaps, or—" "Oh, no. Why should I? On the contrary, I am ready to obey. Only inequality is intolerable. To respect oneself and obey, that I can understand. That's happiness, but a subordinate existence? No, I've had enough of that as it is." "Enough of that as it is," Arkady repeated after Katya. Yes, he went on. "You're not Anna Sergeyevna's sister for nothing. You're just as independent as she is, but you're more reserved. I'm certain you wouldn't be the first to give expression to your feeling, however strong and holy it might be." "Well, what would you expect?" asked Katya. "You're equally clever, and you've as much, if not more, character than she." "Don't compare me with my sister, please," interposed Katya hurriedly. "That's too much to my disadvantage. You seem to forget my sister's beautiful and clever, and you, in particular, Arkady Nikolaevich, ought not to say such things, and with such a serious face, too." "What do you mean by you in particular? And what makes you suppose I'm joking?" "Of course you're joking." "You think so? But what if I'm persuaded of what I say? If I believe I have not put it strongly enough, even?" "I don't understand you." "Really? Well, now I see. I certainly took you to be more observant than you are." "How?" Arkady made no answer and turned away, while Katya looked for a few more crumbs in the basket and began throwing them to the sparrows. But she moved her arm too vigorously, and they flew away without stopping to pick them up. Katerina Sergeyevna," began Arkady suddenly. "It's of no consequence to you, probably, but let me tell you, I put you not only above your sister, but above everyone in the world." He got up and went quickly away, as though he were frightened at the words that had fallen from his lips. Katya let her two hands drop together with the basket onto her lap, and with bent head she stared a long while after Arkady. Gradually a crimson flush came faintly out upon her cheeks, but her lips did not smile, and her dark eyes had a look of perplexity and some other, as yet undefined, feeling. "Are you alone?" she heard the voice of Anna Sergeyevna near her. "I thought you came into the garden with Arkady." Katya slowly raised her eyes to her sister. Elegantly, even elaborately dressed, she was standing in the path and tickling Fifi's ears with the tip of her open parasol, and slowly replied, "Yes, I'm alone." "So I see," she answered with a smile. "I suppose he has gone to his room?" "Yes." "Have you been reading together?" "Yes." Anna Sergeyevna took Katya by the chin and lifted her face up. "You have not been quarreling, I hope?" "No," said Katya, and she quietly removed her sister's hand. "How solemnly you answer." "I expected to find him here and meant to suggest his coming for a walk with me. That's what he's always asking for. They have sent you some shoes from the town. Go and try them on. I noticed only yesterday your old ones are quite shabby. You never think enough about it, and you have such charming little feet. Your hands are nice too, though they're large, so you must make the most of your little feet. But you're not vain." Anna Sergeyevna went farther along the path with a light rustle of her beautiful gown. Katya got up from the grass and, taking Heine with her, went away too, but not to try on her shoes. "Charming little feet," she thought as she slowly and lightly mounted the stone steps of the terrace, which were burning with the heat of the sun. "Charming little feet, you call them. Well, he shall be at them." But all at once a feeling of shame came upon her, and she ran swiftly upstairs. Arkady had gone along the corridor to his room. The servant had overtaken him and announced that Mr. Bazarov was in his room. "Yevgeny," murmured Arkady, almost with dismay. "Has he been here long?" "Mr. Bazarov arrived this minute, sir, and gave orders not to announce him to Anna Sergeyevna, but to show him straight up to you." "Can any misfortune have happened at home?" thought Arkady, and running hurriedly up the stairs, he at once opened the door. The sight of Bazarov at once reassured him, though a more experienced eye might very probably have discerned signs of inward agitation in the sunken, though still energetic face of the unexpected visitor. With a dusty cloak over his shoulders, with a cap on his head, he was sitting at the window. He did not even get up when Arkady flung himself with noisy exclamations on his neck. "This is unexpected. What good luck brought you?" he kept repeating, bustling about the room like one who both imagines himself and wishes to show himself delighted. "I suppose everything's all right at home? Everyone's well, eh?" "Everything's all right, but not everyone's well," said Bazarov. "Don't be a chatterbox, but send for some kvass for me. Sit down and listen while I tell you all about it in a few, but I hope pretty vigorous sentences." Arkady was quiet while Bazarov described his duel with Pavel Petrovich. Arkady was very much surprised and even grieved, but he didn't think it necessary to show this. He only asked whether his uncle's wound was really not serious, and on receiving the reply that it was most interesting, but not from a medical point of view, he gave a forced smile, but at heart he felt both wounded and, as it were, ashamed. Bazarov seemed to understand him. "Yes, my dear fellow," he commented, "you see what comes of living with feudal personages? You turn a feudal personage yourself and find yourself taking part in knightly tournaments." "Well, so I set off for my father's," Bazarov wound up, "and I've turned in here on the way. To tell you all this, I should say, if I didn't think a useless lie a piece of foolery. No, I turned in here. The devil only knows why. You see, it's sometimes a good thing for a man to take himself by the scruff of the neck and pull himself up like a radish out of its bed. That's what I've been doing of late. but I wanted to have one more look at what I'm giving up, at the bed where I've been planted. I hope those words don't refer to me, responded Arkady with some emotion. I hope you don't think of giving me up. Bazarov turned an intent, almost piercing look upon him. Would that be such a grief to you? It strikes me you have given me up already. You look so fresh and smart. Your affair with Anna Sergeyevna must be getting on successfully. What do you mean by my affair with Anna Sergeyevna? Why, didn't you come here from the town on her account, my little warbler? By the way, how are those Sunday schools getting on? You mean to tell me you're not in love with her? Or have you already reached the stage of discretion? Evgeny, you know I have always been open with you. I can assure you, I will swear to you, you're making a mistake. That's another story, remarked Bazarov in an undertone. But you mustn't excite yourself. It's a matter of absolute indifference to me. A sentimentalist would say, I feel that our paths are beginning to part. But I'll simply say that we're tired of each other. Evgeny, my dear soul, there's no great harm in that. One gets tired of much more than that in this life. And now I suppose we'd better say goodbye, hadn't we? Ever since I've been here, I've had such a loathsome feeling. Just as if I'd been reading Gogol's effusions to the governor of Kaluga's wife. By the way, I didn't tell them to take the horses out. Upon my word, this is too much. Why? I'll say nothing of myself, but that would be discourteous to the last degree to Anna Sergeyevna, who will certainly wish to see you. Oh, you're mistaken there. On the contrary, I am certain I'm right, retorted Arkady. And what are you pretending for? If it comes to that, haven't you come here on her account yourself? That may be so, but you're mistaken anyway. But Arkady was right. Anna Sergeyevna desired to see Bazarov and sent a summons to him by a servant. Bazarov changed his clothes before going to her. It turned out that he had packed his new suit so as to be able to get it out easily. Madame Odintsov received him not in the room where he had so unexpectedly declared his love to her, but in the drawing room. She held her fingertips out to him cordially, but her face betrayed an involuntary sense of tension. Anna Sergeyevna, Bazarov hastened to say, before everything else I must set your mind at rest. Before you is a poor mortal who has come to his senses long ago and hopes other people too have forgotten his follies. I am going away for a long while, and though, as you will allow, I'm by no means a very soft creature, it would be anything but cheerful for me to carry away with me the idea that you remember me with repugnance. Anna Sergeyevna gave a deep sigh like one who has just climbed up a high mountain, and her face was lighted up by a smile. She held out her hand a second time to Bazarov and responded to his pressure. Let bygones be bygones, she said. I am all the readier to do so because, speaking from my conscience, I was to blame then, too, for flirting or something. In a word, let us be friends as before. That was a dream, wasn't it? And who remembers dreams? Who remembers them? And besides, love, you know, is a purely imaginary feeling. Really? I am very glad to hear that. So Anna Sergeyevna spoke. And so spoke Bazarov. They both supposed they were speaking the truth. Was the truth, the whole truth, to be found in their words? They could not themselves have said, and much less could the author. But a conversation followed between them precisely as though they completely believed one another. Anna Sergeyevna asked Bazarov, among other things, what he had been doing at the Kirsanovs. He was on the point of telling her about his duel with Pavel Petrovich, but he checked himself with the thought that she might imagine he was trying to make himself interesting, and answered that he had been at work all the time. And I, observed Anna Sergeyevna, had a fit of depression at first, goodness knows why. I even made plans for going abroad. Fancy. Then it passed off. Your friend Arkady Nikolaich came, and I fell back into my old routine and took up my real part again. What part is that, may I ask? The character of aunt, guardian, mother, call it what you like. By the way, do you know, I never quite understood your close friendship with Arkady Nikolaich. I thought him rather insignificant. But now I have come to know him better and to see that he is clever. And he's young. He's young, that's the great thing. Not like you and me, Evgeny Vasilyevich. Is he still as shy in your company? Queried Bazarov. Why, was he? Anna Sergeyevna began, and after a brief pause she went on. He's grown more confiding now. He talks to me. He used to avoid me before, though indeed I didn't seek his society either. He's more friends with Katya. Bazarov felt irritated. A woman can't help humbugging, of course, he thought. You say he used to avoid you, he said aloud with a chilly smile. But it's probably no secret to you that he was in love with you. What? He too? Fell from Anna Sergeyevna's lips. He too, repeated Bazarov with a submissive bow. Can it be you didn't know it, and I've told you something new? Anna Sergeyevna dropped her eyes. You are mistaken, Evgeny Vasilyevich. I don't think so. But perhaps I ought not to have mentioned it. And don't you try telling me lies again for the future, he added to himself. Why not? But I imagine that in this too you are attributing too much importance to a passing impression. I begin to suspect you are inclined to exaggeration. We'd better not talk about it, Anna Sergeyevna. Oh, why? She retorted. But she herself led the conversation into another channel. She was still ill at ease with Bazarov, though she had told him and assured herself that everything was forgotten. While she was exchanging the simplest sentences with him, even while she was jesting with him, she was conscious of a faint spasm of dread. So people on a steamer at sea talk and laugh carelessly for all the world as though they were on dry land, but let only the slightest hitch occur. Let the least sign be seen of anything out of the common, and at once on every face there comes out an expression of peculiar alarm, betraying the constant consciousness of constant danger. Anna Sergeyevna's conversation with Bazarov did not last long. She began to seem absorbed in thought, answered abstractedly, and suggested at last that they should go into the hall where they found the princess and Katya. But where is Arkady Nikolaich? Inquired the lady of the house, and on hearing that he had not shown himself for more than an hour, she sent for him. He was not very quickly found. He had hidden himself in the very thickest part of the garden, and with his chin propped on his folded hands, he was sitting lost in meditation. They were deep and serious meditations, but not mournful. He knew Anna Sergeyevna was sitting alone with Bazarov, and he felt no jealousy, as once he had. On the contrary, his face slowly brightened. He seemed to be at once wondering and rejoicing and resolving on something.